Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for kindly waiting. We would like to begin parallel session 1, IGES 1.5 degrees roadmap, an action plan for accelerating transformational change. What Japan needs to do. Due to the time constraints, after the IGES 1.5 degrees roadmap has been put together, we did not have ample time to provide both the English version or translation of the Japanese version. From this point onwards, Program Director Climate and Energy IGES, Mr. Tamura Kentaro will lead the way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the encouraging applause. Well, then we'd like to begin with the IGES 1.5 degrees roadmap and action plan for accelerating transformational change and what Japan needs to do. And I'm with the program director for climate and energy at IGES. I will be serving as a moderator. My name is Tamura Kentaro. Before we enter into the session, I would like to briefly explain the backdrop by which we are to engage in a panel discussion. As already, I'm sure you have been informed through the media press, 2023 rather, we have achieved historical records in labeling the year as the hottest year in meteorological record. And there have been multiple disaster events that have unfolded, and the stakeholders have been attentive to the necessity of reducing global warming within the confines of 1.5 degrees centigrade against pre-industrial levels. However, initiatives taken across the world have not caught up with the 1.5 degrees target, and the latest UNEP environmental program, there's an emission gap report that has been disclosed and that has already captured that very fact, and it is important that all countries and all industrial sectors accelerate their activity. Otherwise, it is impossible to achieve the 1.5 degree target, and this also applies to Japan as well. And given the situation, we have decided that we need to look at what Japan needs to do. Are we aligned with the 1.5 degree target in terms of speed, as well as the range by which we will be able to suppress global warming? We have decided that a roadmap needs to be drawn, and we have decided to take this opportunity to share the roadmap with you. And naturally, with this roadmap, and we'll go into some detail, but we need to be aligned with the 1.5 degrees centigrade numerical target, which will mean that we will have to see a reduction in terms of emissions. But this roadmap does not merely serve the purpose of reducing emissions. It will serve as a means by which Japanese society will be able to deal with social issues to address changes that will come about. And this roadmap will help to encourage and push ahead with activities that is required to deal with these changes, and also taking a step ahead for next year in Japan. Likewise, the next emission reduction target discussions will begin. And we hope to be able to reflect the discussions that prevailed as we put together the 1.5 degrees roadmap into that very discussion. And this will be an opportunity by which we first are able to share the roadmap with you. We will need to discuss what has prompted us to drop the roadmap, especially from the private sector perspective and the issues confronting the private sector. And thereafter, we'll talk about the roadmap and what this is. And we need to, of course, ensure that this is accepted by society at large. What does it take for that to happen? This will be discussed within this panel session. And we have invited the 3 members of IGES who have been instrumental in putting together the 1.5 degrees roadmap in order of presentation, we have the Research Manager Business Task Force at IGES, Mr. Iwata Ikuru, and he will be joining us online. And just to the left of me is the Research Manager at Climate and Energy at IGES. He's the Research Manager, Mr. Kuriyama Akihisa. And beside him, from IGES, Research Manager at the Kansai Research Center, Mr. Tanaka Yugo. And from these three members, we will hear a briefing about the roadmap and subsequently enter into panel discussion. And from NHK Enterprise, we have the executive producer, Ms. Gendatsu Kyoko, who will join us for the panel discussion. We also have, from Climate Bonds Initiative, the Japan Program Manager, and also IGES Finance Task Force Program Manager, Ms. Morishita Michael, who will join us for the panel discussion after the briefing, and there will be discussions as to how we will be able to make use of the roadmap. And thereafter, for over 20 minutes, we would like to receive questions from the audience. And as for the Q&A, we would like to receive your questions by a show of hands. And thereafter, since this is being conducted in a hybrid format, we will receive questions over Zoom. For those of you who are joining us over Zoom, please use the Q&A function from where you will be posting your questions. There's also a thumbs up button there. Even if you are not presenting a question, if you want to be able to hear about the questions that have been posted on the Q&A box, also show likewise. And then we will pick up on the questions with the largest number of the thumbs up sign. And now we would like to go into the presentation. First of all, we would like to hear from Mr. Iwata Ikuru about roadmap 1.5 degrees. What is the necessity, especially looking at it from the private sector perspective? Why is this necessary? If you could talk about, of course, the sense of issues confronting the private sector, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? This is Iwata speaking. I'd like to share my screen. And this is about why do the business sector want 1.5 degrees roadmap. We have produced this roadmap together with the business sector, and therefore I'd like to talk about the value that this roadmap holds for the business sector. The world, as a result of the CO2 emission of human activities, we see that there is a high CO2 intensity. In order to keep the temperature rise within 1.5 degrees at IPC, it says that we have to try to carry out a number of activities. In order to contain temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, we have to not only achieve net zero by 2050, but the pathway to 2050 will be important. In other words, we have to rapidly and significantly reduce emission so as to turn the curve downwards. And first, as Tamura-san was saying, this year we have seen climate change triggered disasters in large numbers, and the severity has increased. And in Japan, we need to strengthen various measures to address climate change along with others. And policy and enterprises are having a major impact due to climate change. Now, in the past, companies have been analyzing the risk of climate change on their business, but I think there is need for more precise measures. For example, at GFANS, in their guideline, it talks about the transition, the financial alliance, the net zero transition plan, and the need for funding. And also, there is the UNHLEG, a UN high-level expert group. And last year, they produced a report which talks about the commitment to net zero needs to have interim targets every 5 years. And it has to be specific in terms of the pathway, so as to be in line with the 1.5C model pathway. But what specifically do businesses have to do in order to achieve this goal? I think there is a need for a more precise guideline. Decarbonization has an impact on socio-economy, and the world trend target is aiming for 1.5 degrees. What sort of changes are likely to happen, and which market is going to grow or shrink? And these things need to be understood well for the companies to build their strategy. In addition, there is a need to decarbonize the supply chain, and they need to put in place a timeline for this to happen. And this is something that will be the basis for companies to make decisions to invest and develop technologies. For each sector, they need to have a roadmap indicating the pathway that they should be taking, and this will be a benchmark for them to follow. Now, in Japan, there are a large number of companies engaged in decarbonization, but they're troubled with the fact that there is lack of renewables. In Japan, more than 80 companies have committed to the renewables RE100, but to achieve this, there is not enough power supply. Products that have not been made by clean energy will not be purchased. This is a commitment that has been made, and therefore companies want to do business using renewables, but this is not feasible right now in Japan, and this is a risk to many Japanese companies. To change the situation, companies alone cannot make this change, but there needs to be the policies in place to make this happen. So, with a sense of crisis, there are these 249 companies which are working at JCLP, a Japan Climate Leaders Partnership. And they are divided into 3 activities. At first, they're trying to acquire the latest knowledge. In recent COP, executives have participated, and they have tried to learn from other leading companies and other sectors at COP. And also within and outside of JCLP, they're collaborating between companies so as to share information and try to promote decarbonization of their supply chain. In addition, they are trying to deliver the voices to policymakers and government. The other day, there was this decarbonization acceleration proposal made for floating wind power. And the people at JCLP, as I said, the members, wanting to have a roadmap to indicate the direction to be taken. And therefore, in order to keep it in mind and realize the 1.5 degrees C goal, IGES and JCLP has been studying how we can produce a roadmap. And we try to reflect the voices of companies. It was quite a unique process. Also, at the COP in Dubai, we had the side event organized by JCLP, and they discussed this issue based on our roadmap. And aside from the members, and venture capitalists and IEC and other speakers came to take part in the event. And in regards to this 1.5 degrees roadmap, both government and businesses should be cooperating and trying to make clear what each business sector should be doing. I think this side event was very highly appraised by both Japanese and others, and would like to share this information later with all of you. Thank you.
The 1.5 degrees centigrade target oriented, of course, conscientiousness among the private sector has been presented, and JCLP has been introduced to illustrate that example. The importance of 1.5 degrees numerical target. This is, of course, a point in which our interest is aligned. And in COP28, we have hosted a side event to discuss this matter, and has been well received by overseas panelists as well. And so we have hyped up expectations, and now we'd like to turn over to Mr. Kuriyama. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. My name is Kuriyama Akihisa, Research Manager, Climate and Energy at IGES. If you could project the PowerPoint. If we could project the next slide. At IGES 1.5 roadmap have been put together against, of course, this objective. As Mr. Iwata has mentioned, there is this numerical target 1.5 degrees. That is to say, not just to achieve net zero by 2050, but in 2030 and also 2040 to be able to reduce emissions dramatically. And that is, of course, the requirement. And therefore, when we look at this 2050 in a linear pattern, we are to reduce emissions. But even prior to that, it is important that we are able to achieve emission reductions early on. And the question arises as to how we will be able to achieve this. And this is the sense of issue, the crisis that we have been, of course, overcome by. And we need to share with you how we're going to achieve the process of decarbonization. To the very left, we have the carbon dioxide emissions. And we have on the horizontal axis energy consumption. On the vertical axis, we have the carbon dioxide emissions. And we need to first think about, of course, socioeconomic changes by which there will be changes in terms of energy consumption levels. And then we have to look at energy conservation, also electrification, which could be rolled out. And this will also have an impact on how much consumption is reduced. And thereafter, we will also be considering the introduction of renewables as well as hydrogen so that we will be able to achieve carbon dioxide per consumption levels. And basically, we will be able to reduce a size as against the first graphics to the very left. And that and beyond that, we will be harvesting technology that will allow us to capture carbon dioxide emissions that have already accumulated into the atmosphere. These are information that we've been sharing with various stakeholders, and due to various factors will come into play, and will have an impact on how much of the emissions reduction we will be able to achieve. So we need to think about to what extent and by what timeline what needs to be done. And we have been discussing these matters with stakeholders to understand which elements need to be rolled out at what phase and how we will be able to resolve social issues. And our approach has taken that into perspective as we try to create the 1.5 degree roadmap. The roadmap is very, very extensive. However, I would like to narrow down on three key messages. The first of which is to link various demand-side changes into decarbonization efforts. We need to think about not only technology-only scenarios, but we also need to consider the changes that are happening on the demand side. Now, first of all, we will be looking at, of course, measures taken on the demand side until 2040. Most of this will be electrified, and energy-saving measures will be taken. As for electrification, we will be looking at electrification of hot water and also cold water heat demand, and also electrification of vehicles as well. This will have an impact not only on the progression of electrification, but also energy saving as well. And moving on to the second from the very right, we have thermal insulation performance and also enhancement of efficiency in machines and in devices as well. The other, of course, aspect is to enlarge the use of renewables at an early point in time. By 2035, threefold of where we are right now, and tenfold from where we are by the year 2050 comes around. And together with the industry, we have conducted exchange of views and we have identified these target numbers. And the other aspect, of course, has to do with the technology side of the equation. We talked about electrification, also energy saving measures. Of course, these are fairly mature sets of technology that can be introduced early on. However, for example, in iron and such industries, we will need to introduce, say, hydrogen and other technology. It will take somewhat of time. However, from 2040 and onwards, we will be able to see full-fledged introduction of these technologies, which are not yet currently mature. As we accumulate these developments, we have been looking at the GHS emissions, as you can see in the green line. And down below, we have the 1.5 degree benchmark, which is a gray line. And this will allow us to align this effort. The green line is somewhat higher than the gray line. And also the reduction pace is rather linear. And if we have multiple sets of technologies, it is very important to note that we are not able to readily reduce the emissions levels to achieve the 1.5 degrees benchmark. But then we also have to think about what's happening on the demand side as well. So what are the changes that are happening? There's digital transformation for high value added and productivity improvement. And in specifics, what does this mean? We have the industry and also office segment where digitalization will enhance productivity, and also telework and online meetings will also increase. And also mobility at the center, we have in transportation, we have a car sharing, and we also see efficiency in logistics and distribution as well. And to the very right, we have the energy use, and DX will also have an impact, as we can expect to see a quick demand response. And this will progress not to combat climate change, but rather to enhance the productivity in our society. And so in a sense, this is an outcome of the pursuit of benefits through these technologies, and therefore resolution of social issues and climate change combating measures to achieve a more fulfilling lifestyle will allow us to go down this path. And if you look at the changes in demand, we can expect to see the industry structure change as well. This is 2015 to 2050, and we're looking at changes in the domestic productivity. In terms of industrial sector, we can expect to see some industries enhance their productivity, some will see a decline in productivity. It is not as if a company is going to disappear, but it is to say that when a company that is product sales oriented will be shifting away into service delivery company, and that will allow them to grow. For example, car manufacturers will now be able to deliver on value add to present mobility to society. And this will also allow them to achieve a value add and also benefits to society as well. So this will be the way you look at it. So when you look at the changes on the demand side and regard the green line, which is declining downwards, and which will become more aligned with the gray line, which is the 1.5 degrees centigrade benchmark. And therefore, not only technological measures, but also changes in the demand side will allow us to achieve or come closer to the 1.5 degrees benchmark. And having conducted this analysis, we have put together the 1.5 degrees roadmap. But we need to, of course, moderate the curve, and we have conducted social changes. Social changes are not going to dramatically happen right away. And putting that into perspective, we have taken a median or moderate demand side changes, and the green line is somewhat elevated. And ultimately, in order to achieve 1.5 degrees benchmark, we need to also use, say, a DAX, direct air capture from the atmosphere. This is what we are seeing. And as for the 1.5 degrees roadmap, this is a scenario that we have adopted. So what are the factors that will come into play? We have conducted an analysis, and ultimately we are looking at the final energy consumption rate from now to 2050. Because of what factors are we going to see a decline? We have captured this in this graph. 48% energy consumption is expected to decline, and energy saving, electrification, also hydrogen is attributed to 25% rather, and changes in society and also the economy due to digitalization is responsible for 17% of the decline. And this will allow us to understand fully how also changes on the demand side, namely social changes, will factor in. And the second message is here. If we change the rules of electricity grid operation, change the flow and use of money, we can build an energy system with more than 80% renewable energy. And we have conducted verification using specialized power system simulation. So what are the processes involved? We have decided on the energy demand. Of course, this is attributed to changes in social structure and also changes in mobility among people. And against the energy use, we are looking at how much is responsible for energy use and also renewable energy. This have all been factored in, and we have a more granular model for electricity, as we see here. And we are looking at the power grid simulation, and we have used a very detailed model, 450 locations on a per hour basis. We are looking at the power balance, power supply demand balance. And the grid operation will be quite different from what we are having right now. On a unit order, we are deploying energy sources that are the cheapest, and we are also using renewable energy, and also those that are responsible for grid stabilization, for example, using surplus energy to create hydrogen, and also VTG, a vehicle to grid EV grid stabilization. We are also using, of course, a household power generation. And even where we are not able to achieve a grid stabilization, we will use hydrogen as well, domestic green water gas-fired power retrofitted from existing gas-fired plants. In 2030, 2040, and 2050, we have conducted calculations, you can see here. Firstly, 2035, until that year, coal-fired thermal power plants will phase out. And as for gas thermal, 2040, up until that point in time, from 2040, it will taper down. As for renewables, we can expect to see an expansion. On the early stages, of course, we will see the rooftop photovoltaic power generation. 2035 thereafter, we can expect to see floating wind power generators. As for the floating wind power generation, of course, it will supply electricity, but also can be used to supply electricity to produce hydrogen as well. And to the right, it might be very difficult to see, but what is color shaded indicate electric grid, electric-related demand, and the light grayish area indicates hydrogen generation. So 2030 to 2040, around that time, we can expect to see the demand for hydrogen power increase, and that is where the offshore wind power will come into play. And I've talked about renewables, and now I need to look at cost of electricity. I'm sure you're paying attention to that. And this is also an area in which we have conducted verification as well. Looking at this graph here, this to the left, we have 2020 and 2022, the power cost as of now. And to the right, we have the IGES cost. With the I.5 degrees roadmap cost, of course, there's sector coupling among various sources, and therefore, outside of electricity, there are also costs that are being shared. We'll have to look at the top three in this bar graph. So it is not as if all of this is being fed into the electricity power grid, and therefore we have indicated this by the dotted line. In 2022, the fossil fuel costs have surged, but then thereafter, we find that the electricity costs have declined from that point onwards, and hence, more than now, we can expect to see electricity costs decline, to say the least. And another point for consideration, with renewable energy increasing, we can expect to see energy self-supply, self-sufficiency rate also increase as well, which will mean that the import cost of fossil fuel will decline, currently at 20 or 30 trillion yen per year, and that's what we can expect to see 2030 and beyond. And also investment, however, is necessary as well, which is about 5 trillion yen on a per annum basis. And hence, this will change the flow of money, and the money that have made its way overseas to procure supply will now be returned to domestic Japan, and this will be a positive for Japanese society. So we believe, and that would be the message that we would like to share with you as well. This is key message 3, and there is a lot that needs to be done for now, of which we need to present the specifics, and we have indicated the milestones as well as action plans within the roadmap so that we were able to, together with the stakeholders, create such a society. And as for the milestone, in each of these sectors and socio-economy overall, that is, including, of course, building structures as well as transport and also manufacturing and also electricity. Would like to just look at electricity and also the line at the very top, that's the socioeconomy. And now, first of all, for socioeconomy, there are things that we need to embark upon immediately. That is to say, investment into digital and also decarbonization. And on top of that, we need to, of course, achieve efficiency and also impact in the investment. And therefore, carbon pricing has to come in as well. And therefore, we need to have a phased-in introduction of carbon pricing. And as I've mentioned a little while earlier, this will also change the structure of society, which will also mean that there will be movements in terms of labor as well. And therefore, we need to expand on active labor market policies as well, and also ensure that the rights of workers are protected as well. And so this will require major changes in society. We need to prepare ahead for that, of which the digital portion is substantially important. We need to invest on digital human resources, and we need to have infrastructure in place so that such talent will be able to fulfill their potential. We need to have a circular economy to which technology development has to come into place, and also market development likewise, and resin and also plastic substitute material, cross-laminated timber and paper recycling, the use of which will need to be encouraged. And from 2030 to the right and onwards, we need to deploy and implement, which will mean that the full-fledged introduction of carbon pricing needs to happen. And also, the digital knowledge will need to be, of course, rolled out, and this will produce new opportunities for business, and businesses will also have to be transformed. And this will be a stage in which a new technology will be rolled out, and also although self-drive will need to have a market, and likewise in the transportation, distribution, logistics sector as well. And now, as for the electricity or power sector, there are several categories that we have produced here. First of all, what needs to be done, of course, is to create the rules. When we look at renewable energy, of course, renewable energy per se will not be used. We need to, of course, tie this into the power grids. Otherwise, we will not be able to make good use of the power that is presented. Up to now has been fossil fuel-based power grids. However, this will have to be transitioned into renewables, and therefore, we need to have a market rule in place. And we also need a mechanism and rules, a set of rules that will manage the interregional lines. And we need to combine this with various market functions so that renewable energy will be put into best use. And this will have to come hand in hand with grid management and also interregional transmission line management. And 2040 and onwards, we need to look at the hardware efforts as well. We need to accommodate steps to create and consume energy on a localized basis. We need to diversify and not centralize the use of energy. And to come 2040, hydrogen use will expand, which will mean that we need to have incentives available to encourage the use of green hydrogen. I now say in terms of photovoltaic, as Mr. Tamura has mentioned, rooftop solar installation is at the center of this focus. The rooftop installation will have to become obligatory. And this will also mean that there will be surplus energy, which will be used not just by that building structure, but also shared regionally. And there will also need to be an aggregation business that will have to be done promptly. And when it comes to, of course, individual standalone building structures, as well as small and medium-sized enterprise buildings, there is still a dire lack of financing instruments available, and that will also have to be put into place. And also, we need to look at also farmlands, deserted farmland, which cannot be used for that purpose. We find that, of course, the rights of using land has become very, very complex. And of course, we're looking at farmland. We need to, of course, pursue sustainable farming. Otherwise, we will not be able to sustain this effort to introduce photovoltaic power generation. And we also have the perovskites, which is readily available for commercialization. 2030 and onwards, we will need to step up on solar installation in new building structures. And we can expect to see this expand. And therefore, we will also need to think about, of course, the replacement demand, as well as what needs to be done in terms of coping with the discarded panels as well. We need to set the priorities, and we also need to look at the fact that the renewables are going to be a larger proportion of power supply, and we need to introduce more sophisticated prediction technology as well. For wind power, we need to look at very proactive targets, and by which the business sectors will be able to work on talent development and also the use EEZs as well. And we need to set the rules in place. I know that I'm running short of time, and therefore I would like to speed ahead. And as for the onshore wind power, it is important to understand how we will be able to shorten the lead time, and we need to build a consensus with the local community as well. And these are action plans that we have put together. And lastly, by way of summary, I would like to say that we need to take dramatic action on the supply side. We need to also increase and promptly introduce and also increase the use of renewables. What can be done? This will allow us to produce new business opportunities and also ways in which we will be able to build a better life for the public. And with this thought in mind, we have put together the 1.5 degrees roadmap. That is all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, as was mentioned at the end, this roadmap, we produce this roadmap, but the next question is how to disseminate this to society. I think this will be the next issue that needs to be addressed. And therefore, Tanaka-san, can you talk about how you can develop this into a movement, please? Hello? I am Tanaka from the Kansai Research Center. In the previous presentation, it talked about the 1.5 degrees roadmap, the background, and how the process that took place in coming up with the roadmap. And next, I'd like to talk about what we want to do with this roadmap. Well, naturally, what we're aiming towards is not drawing up our ideal roadmap, but instead we are interested in how society can actually change towards this 1.5 degrees target. In order to achieve this target, if I may repeat, there needs to be socio-economic changes, and therefore such transformation needs to take place. But such changes are not only for the sake of climate change. It is necessary to find ways to enhance the well-being of society as a whole by solving climate change while also solving other issues in an integrated manner. We also need to, though we know that what needs to be happening, it will not happen overnight, and therefore we need to provide support to a large number of people and gain support from a large number of people. Though it will be impossible to get everyone to agree, how can we create a roadmap that is supported by at least a certain number of members of society? Was something that we had in mind in coming up with this roadmap. Now, the second, well, there are two characteristics, integration and competition. Integration means that we want to avoid any trade-offs, and therefore we have to think about what pathway is necessary, and so that we can pursue synergy. We consulted different experts, businesses in coming up with this plan. And furthermore, co-creation, as it says. Well, as has been said repeatedly, we are aiming towards this 1.5 degrees C target, and we have cooperated with JCLP to listen to the voices of the industry and to try to come up with something that is feasible, and come up with diverse range of measures. And therefore, we believe that roadmap is something that we wanted to reflect the will of the members of society. Let me explain about some examples. First, about integration. Well, we say integration, but for example, the renewables that we're assuming, the main power source is the floating offshore wind power, and solar, it will be the rooftop solar panels, and also the use of the farmland. So while the farmers are farming, we want to do solar sharing, and that is, and this is an area that we have focused on. Now, for example, we have had discussions with ecological experts. And the mitigation of climate change does have a contribution to preserving the ecosystem, but in its approach, we should not install huge structures in habitats and migration routes of living organisms, because this will cause a major trade-off. So how to avoid this? Well, we are not always able to avert this, but still we have carefully considered, and in designing with such consideration, we can try to avoid such negative impacts. So we have included this in our scenario. And furthermore, from an energy perspective, we think it has to be rational, the way we do it. And therefore, from an energy system perspective, we want to have the optimum design and the least amount of cost. And these are the options that are possible and are included in the roadmap. Now, under what conditions do we think that these scenarios are feasible? In order to study this, we have looked into the bottlenecks of the different measures, and also the measures needed to be put in place to remove those bottlenecks. We worked with the business sector for this. The second, about co-creation. Well, JCLP, in our dialogue with JCLP, we learned that our scenario or roadmap needs to be realistic and attractive. So we have to question the response from the business sector, and it depends on the individual. Some companies say that socio transformation needs to come first. There are such companies. Meanwhile, there are others who say social transformation is not realistic, and instead technology should be given greater priority. So there are different opinions, and so we try to incorporate this range of different opinions, and we have come up with different scenarios, so that for each scenario we can think about the emission path as shown on the right hand side. These are the paths that we considered. There's a range here, but for most of it there are commonalities, we think, and therefore we have tried to take a balanced approach, taking somewhere in between these two. Now, lastly, using this roadmap, what do we want to do? I'd like to give you a specific image of what we're aiming towards here. And so that is the reason I included this slide. So Derek Shivers talked about how social movements occurred. And this is a very famous video from which we have taken this. First, this movement or social movement starts, in many cases, from someone being made fun of. But then one person who is a follower, this person who is made fun of becomes a leader, and inviting this follower, you have some more people come in, so a social tipping point. Once you exceed this tipping point, it becomes a risk not to join in. And if you do not join in, you'll be made fun of. This is the movement that is being presented here. Our roadmap is just the template, starting point. I think there's room for improvement, but, well, depending on the individual, it might be that some will say this is not realistic to assume such a transformation. But we want, as many people, to look at this roadmap and feel that they want to see this happen. And then we can work together to make this roadmap a better one, to make this roadmap into a movement. This is what we're hoping to see. That is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. By creating the movement and producing this roadmap and presenting it to society, we might, of course, be confronted by the remarks, it does not seem realistic. However, as we have discussed, this is based on sound foundation, and we have exchanged views with experts to create this roadmap. And the question arises as to how we will be able to win over followers. And as panelists, we have invited a member who has been dedicated to climate change issues and on the importance of 1.5 degrees target. For the media side, we have with us Ms. Gendatsu Kyoko. And first, I'd like to hear your comments on the roadmap. Thank you very much. From NHK Enterprise Incorporated, I'm executive producer. My name is Gendatsu Kyoko. On this 1.5 degrees roadmap, my sincere thought is that I'm very pleased. But once you put your effort into it, it can happen. And you have indicated the path forward. I'm very grateful. Be it experts and also members of the academia, based on evidence, producing such numbers, this has happened, and we are in a position to spread the word. And since we have seen the heat come in this year, we have seen record heat this year, and it appears as if Japan is way behind. And every now and then, I'm overcome with that thought. But today, we have shown us the path forward, indicating if we put ourselves to it, it can happen. And so I'm really encouraged. I'm with together with private broadcasters, we have a compact, 1.5 degrees compact, and this is an activity that we have begun last year together with a public and private broadcaster. And just I would like to show you just a very short film to show what we've been doing. The importance of the 1.5 degrees target, and in order to overcome this, otherwise there will be negative consequences. However, that message has really not taken root here in Japan domestic, so that's an issue. And hence, the roadmap has been presented, indicating that if we put ourselves to it, it can happen, and that's really important. However, the national policy has not caught up. Once again, let's start from the beginning. Domestic media have come together to combine forces to begin a new initiative. And we have taken that first step last year. But more than that, speed is accelerating in climate change. The situation is aggravating. Once again, let's ask ourselves, in order to overcome this crisis, is there not something more that the media can do? Action to reduce global warming gases needs to be communicated not among ourselves, but also to the private company, to the municipalities, as well as the national government, to consider what can be done. There should be a lot more we are able to do. Let's take action to reduce global warming, the 1.5 degree commitment. Let's take action immediately in order to halt global warming. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. The importance of trying to contain the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, and also how this roadmap can be used will be crucial. Well, Tanaka-san was saying this towards the end, but we need to change this into a movement. So in society, We want people to recognize this issue, and we want to mainstream our roadmap. So I think that is what is meant by this movement. Well, as you've just mentioned, people in the media need to communicate facts first. At the same time, in order to change society, I think that you have to try to build up this momentum to make it into a movement. And for this, you need to have some mechanisms in place. Having covered this story or from your experience, is there anything that you can leverage?
As we have heard during the presentation, when it comes to combating global warming and also transformation of the industry, the Japanese have a tendency to take this negatively because this will hike up costs and we need to hold ourselves back. However, when we look at the roadmap, we hear words about well-being, and changes in society will allow us to lead a more comfortable life. And that needs to be communicated. Otherwise, we will not be able to spread the word. I often say that D as a decarbonization will have to be taken in a positive light. And I believe that that is an important perspective. And of course, we cannot take action on morale alone. We often calculate as to the benefits and also the pros and cons. And hence, we have to think about carbon prices. Of course, it would be better to reduce our carbon emissions. If we continue to do so, this will only hit back at us as losses. And if that market sign is now more pronounced, obviously among the private sector with JCLP, for example, they're working together. But we need to understand that we're globally linked. And we'll come to realize the importance. And therefore, in Japan, we have to first work with speed on carbon pricing. When I take a look, the 1.5 degrees line, there's talk about confining the emissions aligned to 1.5 degrees target. But it is essential that we need to understand that we need to work with speed as time is passing. And finally, we've seen some movements to put together a carbon pricing structure. However, we need to work with more emphasis. Of course, the human mind is always talking about, of course, the costs and also benefits. And we're importing 30 trillion yen in terms of fossil fuels. But we need to send out the message that it's more important to invest the likewise sum into, say, renewables. And if we really calculate how much we're spending on importing fossil fuels, it will allow us to really understand what would be the better and more beneficial way. We need to have a message that is more convincing. Otherwise, we will not be able to lead this into a national movement. We cannot just shout the slogan. We need to indicate the evidence so that it is more of a convincing argument. Thank you very much. So we need to take the DE, the departure from carbonization, in a more positive light. But at the same time, we need to also introduce carbon pricing as a mechanism so that those who work to reduce carbon emissions will be able to enjoy the benefits. And of course, painful to our ears, which also indicates that we need to also improve our ways. We need to communicate in a way that is more clear and convincing. And I believe that that is a comment that we have just received from you. Thank you very much.
Well, there might be a bit of an overlap, but we have heard some very positive comments just now. But our roadmap, this IGES roadmap, there are some shortcomings, deficiencies, I think. So do you see any areas that we can improve on this roadmap? If you can give us some advice as to how we can improve the IGES roadmap? Well, I think what will be key is the power sector and how you would make it possible to introduce more renewables. I think this will important. IPCC is also saying that there is a need to mainstream renewable energy. So in doing so, Well, there was talk about changing the rules to operate the grid, power grid. This needs to be done right away. I think it's one of the top priority issues. Without this, well, I'm just saying this, people would not be able to understand. The Japanese power grid operation rule is very complicated, difficult to understand. And so you need to communicate in an easier to understand way to the general public as to what changes need to take place by when. It's a roadmap, so you have to set a deadline and say by when such and such changes need to take place. So it would be better if you have a list indicating these timelines and changes that need to take place. If you have such a thing, then I think it's important that V2G, the vehicle to grid part. Well, if it's so important, people will think that you have to do it right away because the government is trying to increase the EVs, and with this scenario, there's a big gap. So in order to fill this gap, again, I think the rule for operating the power grid, the details need to be made clearer, and that would help people understand. Thank you very much. Well, what you've just mentioned, I think, well, it's a very difficult, it's very complicated. And we have to be careful in communicating this because it's such a complicated process. A few days ago, an American think tank did a webinar on the U.S. power grid, and we introduced our system. And the researcher who attended was very impressed by the American explaining it in a very easy to understand way. But I said then I would look at the video, but then I was told it would be too difficult for me to understand. So I think that it's important, as you mentioned, to try to, in an accurate way, at the same time, in an easy to understand, comprehensible manner, communicate what needs to take place. So I think the rules, first come, first serve, is difficult to understand. But giving priority to renewables, let's connect the renewable energy to the grid. Such words are easier to understand. Thank you. Next, I would like to ask Morishita-san. Well, the basis of business activities is finance. If you want to change businesses, you have to provide the necessary finance. And I was shocked to hear that when I was a young student, but Morishita-san, you are engaged in the climate finance sector. And looking at this roadmap, at your climate bond initiative, well, you do certification, etc. So how do you see the importance of this roadmap from your perspective, please? Thank you very much. Once again, I am Morishita from a Climate Bond Initiative. Well, let me introduce my organization to you. I'll start from there. The Climate Bond Initiative is focusing on the role of institutional investors and trying to do activities to mobilize global capital to combat climate change. We are a non-profit international organization. As Tamina-san has mentioned, what's important in funding is green bonds and be it companies or government, the issuer. Do these green projects, the renewables and others. And for these projects, they need to secure the necessary funding. And these bonds are for those purposes. The green bond, transition bond, they're using the database, but green and transition. What do these mean? And in order to, we have to identify the eligible business activities and set a criteria for each industry and do certification. So we are the fair trade label of the green bond sector. That's how we define ourselves. Now, the certification system, in operating this system, we often hear people say that we are too strict about the standards. It's not realistic. We often hear this being said about us. Or it could be that even if you can partially introduce this, it will be impossible to introduce this for the whole business. And what people are unclear as to what needs to be done to achieve this. Well, in response to this, we say that the standards that we have in place, it is to achieve the 1.5 degree goal. And so we explain that we're not saying that this can be done now, but what needs to be done to achieve the 1.5 degrees goal. But then they ask, how is this achievable? So I think that needs to be the guidance input to help people understand how this can be achieved. We need to have more dialogue and to understand this. So the roadmap, we have incorporated a number of things that need to be done, and we think that the institutional investors and others are facing those challenges that you're talking about. So this roadmap could be an answer to some of the questions that these people have. For example, well, Kuriyama-san explained in detail about this, but introducing renewables, there are bottlenecks that need to be overcome. We have to think about what needs to be done to address these challenges. And I think the roadmap will be a good reference for people to understand what solutions are available. And it really, it's 170 pages long. I had struggled to read the whole text, the roadmap, but transition in the area of transition and steel and chemical. Considering the demand, they come up with a needed production volume and the energy that will be required to produce that volume. And currently, what sort of technology is being used for that? And for each sector, in order to reduce the emission, for each sector, you have the quantified target. I think that financial institutions, when they engage with the business sector, will find this to be very convenient. It will be a benchmark for them. It might not be a benchmark, but still, it will be a good reference to deepen discussion dialogue between institutional investors and the business sector. Thank you. Well, you've touched on this briefly, but financial institutions and institutional investors, this roadmap, do you think it's easy to use? What should be done to make it easier to use? And this IGES roadmap, what improvements do you think should be made so that more institutional investors will want to use it? Do you have any comments about that? Well, this report, it's called a technical report. That's my understanding. And as was mentioned by Gendat-san, I think that it is necessary to present in an easy to understand and simple way, because the institutional investors want to know the conclusion first. And then from there, they look into what verification, what the background is, etc. So if they're interested, they will read the details. So the core message and what is the key core message and what is behind the core message? And if you have that in 2 pages plus the pathway for reduction, it will be a good reference for the investors. And another thing is that, at COP28, there was this event, SBTI. A person said that something similar to this, but this roadmap to be supported by the industry, the business sector, would lead to the government adopting this roadmap. So I think a JCLP we have this dialogue with JCLP plus the target numbers that you have come up with. I think that you have taken up the different targets that different industrial sectors have put in place. So I think that this will be seen differently from the past. But this kind of consultation should engage is financial sector. And you have the fact that you're engaged with the government and the industrial sector needs to become more evident. People needs to be able to see this. And for each stakeholder, you have to have a clear-cut message tailored to their needs. Plus, you have to have this close engagement process and plus follow-up. So if you can have all these things in place, it will be very good. And Climate Bond Initiative would like to collaborate with you to achieve this. Thank you. You need to have a tailor-made, so to say, message. And also, we have to engage different stakeholders. And we would like to ask Climate Bond Initiative to collaborate with us in doing so.
We have received comments from the panelists, and we would like to now set aside some time for Q&A. First of all, we'd like to welcome questions from the audience. If you have questions to the presenters or the panelists, please kindly raise your hand. We will be bringing about the microphone. For WinPress, my name is Mihashi. The 1.5 degrees roadmap. Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. In introducing renewables, I have come to believe that there are some obstacles. For example, Minamisoma, Fukushima Prefecture, when it covered the area, there are many paddy fields that were immersed in salt water, and therefore they have decided to introduce photovoltaic panels. And I visited a company that deployed the panels, and they explained that these are China-made, and they're very cheap, and they've decided to use a China-made model solar panels from the rooftop to the farms in the forest. If all are covered by solar panels, and it would be if it were mostly China-made, I would wonder about energy security issues. Could this not present major problems? This is something that I have come to feel. And within the roadmap, perhaps you have penned this in. As for national industry, say in the solar panel sector, to that industry, what is the design? And we talked about perovskite, silicon tandem system, which holds potential you have mentioned, and I would also like to hear about the outlook. In terms of industry structure, if there could be a roadmap section that could be entered into the entire roadmap picture, it would be very helpful. So I believe. And I'd like to hear from Matsushita-san. Senior Fellow at IGES. My name is Matsushita. I'm also from IGES. And Tamiya-san, Kuriyama-san, Iwata-san, they are part of the team. And at COP28, they have conducted a presentation. It was very timely and also ambitious. Especially to note, they have continued with discussions with stakeholders, JCLP, with whom discussions have prevailed. This is an outstanding endeavor. Now, the stakeholders are very broad in terms of scope, especially looking at climate change impact. That is to say, the future generation would be most impacted, and also vulnerable developing countries, the so-called Global South, and also from a wider perspective, civil society. exchanges, engagements need to be deepened so that for the future generation and also for the Global South members, the report will be meaningful and can be utilized so as to be better improved. And if that is the case, it will be very grateful. The message needs to be clearly cut and win the understanding of the younger generation so that we will be able to engage with them so that we are able to ensure that there is hope for the future. This is in the way of hope, a comment on hope. Thank you very much. As for the first question, in terms of energy security, from that perspective, we'd like to hear. And also in terms of industry policy, if a few remarks could be made on the roadmap. And who would respond? Shall we turn to Tanaka-san? Thank you very much for the question. In our roadmap, we're looking at how the industry structure will evolve in a future version of the current version by introducing various parameters to predict what will happen in the future. We have the future version of the scenario, and we have conducted an estimate of the industry structure. Of course, this will also cover how energy is produced, electricity is produced. There will be a departure from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy, based on which an estimate has been put together. You have mentioned the silicon, of course, solar panels, which are mostly China-made, and this could have implications in terms of energy security. And of course, that I believe will hold true. And in our roadmap, in the future, the perovskite and also the tandem, as well as floating wind power, will be at the center of this design. And also as an industry, this will also bear weight and become very important in terms of the industrial implications as well. So that's been put together in the scenario. And as for PV, should we limit this to domestic produced solar panels? Of course, this will require some discussion. However, it is important that we have a solid supply chain within Japan domestic, and we need to, of course, tap into the potential here in Japan as well. And on top of that, as for the second point, shall I also make mention, and in reference to resource security, not just energy security, but also for batteries, there are also supplies that go into, say, rare metals, and some perhaps today do not use rare metals. But when we look at security, the batteries that are used domestically can be recycled. And this will lead to, of course, material circulation. Of course, this is in the world of the utilization of resources. This will also be of important significance. If there's anything to add on that point, Mr. Kuriyama, please. On solar panels, I would like to offer a comment. When you look at energy industry or otherwise energy security, of course, this is a very complex subject matter. At least as far as energy is concerned, introducing panels, of course, this will not be limited to the panel technology. As renewable energies come in, we have to think about how to control the solar panels and also how we will be able to meet demand as well, which will mean that we will also have to think about management. And we've thought about the industry structure change. We have to think about electrical components and also information IT as well. So the software side is also going to be very important. And this will also be important in terms of profit generation. And this will enter into, of course, the energy business as well. And therefore, we have to think about, of course, field to grid and also other segments of the business as well. So we cannot think about, of course, one single set of technology. We need to combine various energy. And so there is, of course, a comprehensive integration of various technology in this energy sector. This is the way that we will have to take this entire issue into perspective. Thank you very much.
And as for what Dr. Matsushita said, we have to include in our stakeholders counterparts, the younger generation and the global south. But on our part, such dialogue, well, our dialogue is limited to JCLP, the business sector mainly. But going forward, we want to engage with this heavy industry, the steel industry, etc., plus the younger generation. So we are hoping to be able to engage with those younger people as well. Anyone else have any questions from the floor? Yes, please. Kobayashi from Kansai Electric. About I'll avoid energy, but instead ask about carbon pricing. Well, engaging the public is something very important, but as was mentioned during the panel discussion, yes, it is profitable to try to reduce carbon emission, but at the same time, it was recommended that world standard carbon pricing needs to be introduced. In order to change people's behavior, it has to be visible. If not, people will not change their behavior. So am I correct in thinking so? And if so, then how are you going to create such a world? Can you talk about the specifics as to how this can be done? Thank you. Tanaka-san? Thank you very much for the question. Well, as what mentioned by Genda-san, I think that's a very important point that you've raised. Well, with JCLP, we have had dialogues, and many of the companies said that if things go on as is, they will lose out investing. So there needs to be carbon pricing in place at a certain level so that everyone abides by the same rules, because if not, those people who engage in this initiative will lose out. So I think many people were saying this, but in order, if we have the carbon pricing at a level that does not change the behavior of the companies or awareness of the public, this will not do. But it's not something that we can change overnight because it will cause a lot of confusion. And therefore, the government, what it is being discussed, if we use that framework that is being discussed, for example, the add-on 2032 on fossil fuel will be introduced, and that standard needs to be raised at a global standard. And it's necessary to make the announcement at this point in time that will take place in 2032, because then people need to have a preparation period. In order for the changes in behavior to take place, then people need to go through trial and error, and there needs to be time for that. And this, I think, is the type of carbon pricing that will have an impact and change people's behavior. Thank you.
We have received a question related to carbon pricing on Zoom. How much do we need? In the GX League, on a per ton basis, 3,000 yen or thereabouts is being said. But in order to achieve the roadmap, how much will be viable as carbon pricing? I would like to respond. According to our model, we will not be deciding technology based on cost. And I would like to say that first and foremost, and strictly speaking, to say that at a particular standard, I will not be able to say that this will happen. But what we are assuming in the IA Net Zero roadmap, what is expected for all advanced nations by 2030, $130 per ton of carbon dioxide carbon pricing will be deployed. And our understanding is that technology will advance to that state. And that is how I would like to respond to this very question. As to how much is necessary for carbon pricing, we have to think about what are the implications on what kind of industry. And I believe that the answer will differ. If we're going to narrow down on the power generation, industry, we have heard about discussions over 3,000 yen for some gas and also coal-fired. If we are going to reverse the advantages on a short-term perspective, then it will be anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000 yen. However, on the other hand, if we're going to achieve, of course, more drastic changes for iron and steel and also chemical industry, then we have to send a higher signal, which will mean that the carbon prices will be hiked up higher. But the question is about the timing as well. With our model alone, we will not be able to put our finger on when that should happen. We need to have a different set of course, of studies. Carbon pricing and also objective and also timing. These are, of course, pieces of information that really need to be sorted out thoroughly. Otherwise, there will be, of course, some mishaps, and we hope to be able to continue with this discussion.
Thank you very much. Are there any others in the room? Yes, please. Thank you. Saiki speaking. This issue back in 1995 was also already taken up at Yokohama. The meeting. It was a 3-day meeting. So people were thinking about cost benefit, and they said they could not pay for it, and therefore the energy industry on the whole, nuclear, thermal power, was emphasized. So how are you trying to address this? Back in 1995, renewables, we should have been opting to move towards renewables, but the energy sector and the business sector denied this. And then after, up until this time, we're still seeing similar things being said. So what are your thoughts on this? Well, thank you very much. If I interpret your question correctly, in 95, it would have been better if we had pursued renewables, and there was that similar proposal, but the industry reacted that it would be too costly, and therefore they decided not to take such a pathway. Well, if that is so, at this point in time, I think the cost, I think is going down. So renewables are proving to be quite competitive against fossil fuel, including all the additional costs. Fossil fuel, because of the international situation, the prices are rising. And I cannot say for sure that renewables will be cheaper, but I think that it is possible that renewables can compete price-wise. But system integration, sector coupling, as we call it, rather. In the future, the power system produce hydrogen, or there's a system to produce mobility, and these were to combine. It will be difficult to calculate purely the power cost, and it will be a matter of precision, how to allocate what cost to where. So that will be a challenge. So we have to look at it from a range and say that if power costs were to be within this range, it'll be feasible. But then in 2022, all included, I think due to compared to the fuel price rise, renewables are quite competitive, and I think that there is this foundation to make the transition more to renewables. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we would like to receive questions from Zoom. First of all, in the sequence of the thumbs up, No, not really a question, but it's a comment. In terms of environmental education and ESG research is what I'm pursuing. This is not a question, it's a request. It is important to disseminate clear to understand information, but if it's like slogan, using renewables for electricity, that is not what is needed. It is important to indicate the basis by which the conclusions have been drawn. This will lead to, of course, literacy among the citizens, and that is what is required. And of course, we'll have to agree to that. Are there any comments that you would like to offer as to say what needs to be done? I would agree with the commenter. I think the scientific basis, the grounds by which, of course, expressions have been made is important. Of course, a cash copy will have to be very simple. Slogans is not enough, and that is not going to produce results. And this is this is why the 100-some pages is there. And there needs to be a system by which people who are willing to read through the document is now made available to them. Of course, I'm thinking about what needs to happen. In COP28, of course, there has been I don't know if I can call it a slogan, threefold in terms of renewables and twofold in terms of energy saving. And that is from the IEA research outcome. And this has been, of course, repeated throughout various countries and various fora. And through various research institutions, of course, our findings have been, of course, recaptured in a very clear to understand wording. Of course, this will require a different set of creative talent and also ideas as well. Something that I would like to think about with all of you.
Thank you. The next question. The 1.5 degrees C goal. Well, the financial institution, television stations are calling for businesses to abide by this goal, and yet these people are saying so are not certified. What are your thoughts on this? Well, again, we are doing campaign, so we have to think about our own activities and reflect on ourselves. And BBC and Canada's broadcasters, and they have declared net zero, and SBTI, they are trying to comply with these targets. And so we in Japan, the Japanese broadcasters, need to also follow suit. We have to visualize the amount of CO2 that we are emitting. If not, we will not be accepted internationally. There's the Albert system and others where you can visualize CO2 in our content. We're challenging, and I know that people criticize that we are late in doing so, but we are starting to work on it right now. And we recognize that this improvement is necessary. Thank you. We are running out of time, so the last question.
In order to spread the word about roadmap, of course, it is important that we are able to engage the next generation. This will mean that the educators need to first understand the roadmap, and that holds the key. So how can we approach the educator? And that is a question we have received. And Tanaka-san, if you're doing something in Kobe, Kansai area, different from this project, there's an activity we are conducting in Hyogo Prefecture. There are high schoolers that we have gathered, and we talked about what kind of a decarbonized society they want to be able to create. And this is an interactive workshop that we have been conducting for some 4 years now. And there are, of course, teachers regardless of the day holiday, they have also participated, and they have displayed their interest, and they have indicated that they has been worthy of participating, and they have now understand how the world is changing, and they want to be able to, of course, communicate, to spread the word among other high schoolers, and they want to ask us to host other workshops. And so with their feet on the ground, we hope to be able to produce other opportunities by which we will be able to engage in discussions together. Thank you very much. Time has arrived to close this session. And today, I would like to thank all of you for having participated. As we have announced, or as we have discussed, this roadmap has been presented here at this webinar, but that is not the end of this. We need to use this in order to engage society so that this can be put to widespread use in society. And we would like to seriously study this. And to that end, we have received insights from the two panelists and also from the audience. We've received questions. This has been a learning experience for us as well. We hope to be able to, based on sound scientific evidence, we hope to be able to communicate the roadmap in a way that is clear to understand. And with this, we would like to conclude this session. Thank you very much for your attendance. And we'd like to thank the panelists and speakers today as well. We'd like to thank the speakers and panelists, and with this, we would like to conclude panel session 1.